The road into Harbor Point wound along the coastline, hugging the cliffs before dipping toward the water. Daniel Hayes eased his truck along the familiar route, the late afternoon sun slanting low and gold across the waves. 10 years had passed since he had last seen this highway, crisscrossing the country in pursuit of fractured truths as an FBI agent. Yet none of those roads had ever felt alive in the way this one did. This road seemed to breathe, to hum beneath his tires, as if it recognized him. It had carried him away once, when he was younger and restless. The ocean stretched wide to his left, a vast sheet of burnished silver. The tide foamed against rocks, gulls wheeled overhead, and the salt-rich air carried a tang that stung his nose. Each bend of the road revealed a new memory. A fishing trip with his father, his mother's laughter as gulls stole sandwich crusts, Clara Whitfield's auburn hair whipping loose when she leaned out of his old Chevy to feel the wind. Daniel's grip tightened on the steering wheel. He had built a career on compartmentalizing, unlocking emotion in boxes so he could survive crime scenes and interrogations. But Harbor Point was not a case he could file away. The town knew too much about him, and he knew too much about it. The welcome sign came into view, crooked and weather-worn, its once bright blue paint dulled to gray by salt and storms. Welcome to Harbor Point, where the sea meets home. His father had always pointed at it with pride after family road trips, his deep voice booming, "Home, Danny boy, don't ever forget it." For years, Daniel had carried that voice like an anchor. Then he had cut the chain, determined to chase a life larger than this small town. He had forgotten. Or maybe he had tried his hardest to. He slowed the truck as Main Street unfolded before him. Storefronts lined the road, glowing in the amber wash of sunset. The bakery's sunflower-painted windows still welcomed customers. The ice cream parlor still echoed with the shrieks of children, their cones dripping faster than they could eat. The old theater still advertised double features no one outside of Harbor Point cared about anymore. It was as if time had folded back on itself, trapping the town in amber. When he was young, the sameness had felt suffocating. Now, after a decade in a world that spun faster and faster, the sameness felt oddly steady. Though whether that was comfort or trap, he couldn't decide. His hands remained on the wheel, eyes roaming over the streets he had once known so intimately. The town looked smaller now. Perhaps the buildings hadn't changed at all. Perhaps it was he who had grown beyond their scale, stretched by violence and duty and years of exhaustion. Memories pressed in. His father's booming laugh from the police station, his mother's wave from the porch, Clara's smile beneath the lighthouse when forever had seemed possible. He inhaled, long and deep. The ocean's sharp tang cut through memory's haze, grounding him. He parked across from the diner. The truck ticked as the engine cooled. He was here because Harbor Point needed a chief of police, and the Hayes name still meant something in this place. Evening air wrapped around him, cool and tinged with fried seafood drifting from the pier. His boots struck the pavement with a steady rhythm as he crossed toward the squat brick building of the police station. Faces turned his way. Some townsfolk nodded in recognition, others whispered, their expressions caught between welcome and wariness. Harbor Point never forgot its own, especially not those who had left. Inside, the air smelled of coffee, ink, and old paper. The station looked nearly unchanged. The same bulletin board sagging beneath community flyers, the same battered desks. Sergeant Jeff Collins, his old high school teammate, pushed back from his desk and broke into a grin. Time had thickened Jeff's waist and thinned his hair, but his energy was the same. "Well, I'll be damned," Jeff said, striding over and clasping Daniel's hand. "Daniel Hayes, back in Harbor Point. Thought the Bureau had you chained to a desk in D.C., Daniel chuckled, shaking firmly. "Broke the chains. Figured it was time to follow the family tradition." Laughter rippled through the room. Everyone in Harbor Point knew the Hayes story. Grandfather, father, now son. Each had worn the chief's badge. Each had borne the town's safety on their shoulders. The officers welcomed him warmly. They teased about old escapades. They peppered him with questions about big city policing. Harbor Point would not remember only his family's honor. It would also remember the silence of his leaving, the promises he had broken. By the time paperwork was completed, the sun had slid lower. He stepped back into the evening, boots carrying him down familiar streets. Past the library where his mother had volunteered, past the pier where his initials still carved faintly into the railing. Every step stirred memories he wasn't ready to confront. He told himself he was reacquainting himself with the town. In truth, his feet betrayed him, carrying him toward the one place he wasn't ready to face. The Sea Breeze Inn stood proud on its corner. Its whitewashed walls gleamed softly, pale blue shutters framing windows stuffed with flower boxes. The building had always been a landmark, cared for lovingly by the Whitfield family. Travelers praised its warmth. Locals gathered in its dining room for anniversaries and birthdays. For Daniel, it had been something else entirely. The place where he had stolen hours with Clara. The place where he had once believed in futures too fragile to hold. His chest constricted as he slowed. The inn looked unchanged, as timeless as the tide. He had promised himself he wouldn't go there tonight. He wasn't ready. But Harbor Pointe had never been interested in his readiness. And fate, as always, had its own timing. The front door swung open. Clara Whitfield stepped into the evening light. The light caught her auburn hair, igniting it into flame. She wore a simple blouse and jeans, but Daniel saw her as he had always seen her. Steadfast, luminous, more real than anything else in his life. She moved with quiet confidence, the kind that came from years of keeping the inn alive, of holding steady when others faltered. For a heartbeat, the world stopped. His breath hitched. Her eyes widened in recognition, her lips parted. Daniel Hayes. The sound of his name on her tongue struck like a lightning bolt, cracking open memories he had buried deep. He saw them walking the pier, whispering under stars, saw her tears the night he had told her he was leaving, the night he had broken more than one promise. "Hello, Clara," he said, his voice rough. "I guess I've finally come home." She didn't move closer. She didn't retreat. She studied him, expression guarded, weighing the years that yawned between them. Silence stretched, thick and fragile. He searched for words, an apology, an explanation. But everything he might say felt thin, inadequate, unworthy. At last she spoke, voice polite but cool. "So, it's true. You're the new chief," he nodded. "That's the plan." Her lips curved faintly, a ghost of a smile that never reached her eyes. "Well, welcome back. Harbor Pointe hasn't changed much. But you—" She let the words trail away, unfinished, sharper for what she didn't say. From inside, a voice called her name. Clara glanced over her shoulder, then back at him. For a flicker, her eyes softened. Regret, longing, maybe even hope. But then composure slid over her features, as carefully arranged as the shutters on the inn. "I should get back to work," she murmured. "Enjoy your evening, Chief." And with that, she disappeared into the inn, leaving him on the porch with the weight of the past pressing against his chest. Daniel stood rooted, listening to muffled voices and clinking glass from inside. He had imagined this moment in countless variations, sometimes fiery with anger, sometimes tender with forgiveness, sometimes both. He had never imagined it would end in silence. The quiet carved deeper than anger ever could. He gripped the railing, grounding himself. The wood was cool beneath his palms, worn smooth by years of guests leaning just as he did now. The ocean roared distantly, steady and relentless, reminding him of time's patience. He exhaled, long and slow, forcing his pulse to steady. He had come home seeking peace, seeking a fresh start. Instead, the very first door he had opened had led him straight back into the only story he had never been able to escape. And Harbor Pointe, its streets, its memories, its people, was waiting to see whether Daniel Hayes could bear the weight of homecoming or collapse beneath it.